I know how to navigate painful, traumatic experiences. I've been there, I've been through hell, and I survived it. And even better than surviving, I grew from it. And I'm just contemplating at the moment how weird it is that you come across people who are going through their own torment in that moment, and they look at you as if you've never experienced anything but bliss, because you're in a position where you've worked through all your stuff, or you've worked through a lot of stuff, and you've got the benefits of facing yourself and healing your trauma. And the advice or the ideas that I would hand to you if you're going through some stuff is not the information that you would usually expect to hear. And the reason I started contemplating this is because I've noticed a particular person keeps repeating ideas that come from what I call the mental health boohoo narrative, like that really heavily popularized it's okay not to be okay, and everybody's struggling, it ain't weak to speak, life's so hard, which is great, it's got its place. You want to know that you're not alone. You want to know that you're human and we go through things, and I feel like what I do through these journals and through a lot of my content is I show that, but it doesn't end there. You can't just say everything's hard and you're not alone and it's okay to feel like shit, and then that's the end of the conversation. That doesn't help anybody. I don't see that as valuable at all. So I've noticed a lot of people, but one particular person's really highlighted it for me. Just repeating those kinds of mantras. They're like mantras. It's not always that easy when I say when things get hard, that's when you've got to actually accelerate. You've got to push through it so that you don't get bogged. That's one thing that I said. And the response is, it's not always that easy. And my response to the response was, it's never easy. You think that I'm giving this thought to you from a place of ignorance. I'm not. I've been in a place where everything was really difficult, and even doing the simplest things was hard. But even in saying that, a very interesting thing to note in the present moment is I was doing really well in 2014, 2015. I traveled to China to film a documentary. I made a music video for the NRL All-Stars. The opportunities were around. I was working full time as well. So it was the peak of my creative career back then. Everything was just happening. Opportunities were just showing up left, right, and center. And then 2015, I started to explore mental health, and I started the Kai Lives channel that everybody knows and loves in 2016, I think. And that's when I started exploring all of these concepts. And objectively, I can see the trajectory of my life plummeting and spiraling downwards, just getting really bad, manifesting all of these issues, depression, anxiety, and just part of it I felt was everything was being highlighted, every flaw that I had, every weakness that I had became the focus, and it was because of that kind of mental health boohoo narrative where that's what we're focusing on, because it's a way to feel connected. Somebody feels empathy for the hardships of my life, and that feels all warm and fuzzy inside, but it's no fucking good to me. But I didn't know that. So 2016 and onwards, as I started to explore all these things, and I even noticed in the kinds of interviews that I was doing, I was having these conversations that were a pity party, really. And some of it's valid. Like, people need to hear that, like, the kinds of alternative paths through life that, you know, the kinds of shitty hands that people have been dealt, it's real. Like, it's not, you're not born into an equal world at all. And that's like, I don't want to get too much into that right now because I'm on a different train of thought. But yeah, I was recording these discussions and really focusing on the negatives, and like, I was in that frame of mind that was like all the hype at that time, and maybe it still is a little bit, but I've just removed myself from it, where like it's all about like empathy and feeling like you're not the only one that's going through the hard stuff. So just highlighting all these shitty things, and like, it sounds like common sense in the present moment to say that that's going to be negative, like it's going to suck. Like, if we just go around and record a bunch of conversations about how hard life is, what are we going to focus on? But like, don't get so black and white about it and forget the nuance. Like, there is value in talking about the hardships and the struggles of life, but like I said, the conversation can't end there. You can't make a 40-minute discussion about how fucked society is and then just see you later, tune in next week for some more depressing shit. Like, and I'm not belittling anything that I've done or that anybody else has said or anything. Like I said, it's all valid. So I'm saying that don't get so black and white about it. Notice there's nuance to this. But I definitely noticed as I adopted those beliefs, like, and started to focus on like the hardships and everything, that the trajectory of my life went downhill fast, and everybody encouraged me. That's the crazy thing about the culture around mental health. Like, everybody's encouraging you to be vulnerable and admit your flaws and like talk about your depression and your anxiety. And what are we doing? We're just like feeding these stories, man. We're just like going, like, shoveling all of our energy, awareness, time, and everything that we have into growing these identities these are all the things that we don't want, man. And I think we kind of even forget that, or like we become unconscious of that. Like, the reason that we're talking about this stuff is because it's painful and we don't want it, but it becomes like this thing where we get love and validation and connection by sharing these terrible things, like these parts of our lives that hurt. And yeah, it's just like so wild to me to have these realizations, and it's all connected to this idea that like I'm trying to help people. Like, I'm saying, like, don't get sucked into that kind of mindset and that culture around mental health, because it's not good for you. And they're so ingrained in it. We all are. Like, the program's so strong on social media and everything that you seem like a bad person when you say, like, don't get sucked into that mental health boohoo narrative. People are going to be reacting to you and saying, like, you don't get it and all this stuff. Man, I get it. I 100% get it, and I don't have to prove it to you or like seek validation for the journey that I've been on. I know that I've experienced trauma. I've done I've had the ACE tests, the adverse childhood experiences tests, and like done heaps of therapy and all these things. Been on the journey, man. I've gone through it, and I'm telling you from direct empirical evidence that the more that I focused on all that culture of the mental health boohoo narrative, the more it hurt me. And I couldn't see it at the time. I thought that I was doing a great job, giving myself a pat on the back, and just because we're all sort of feeding into that, like, oh, we all are understanding each other and connecting and validating each other's experiences. And yeah, I just feel like I have to, once again, for anybody who's being triggered by this, because I can feel it. I can feel that somebody's triggered. Like, it's still valuable, like all of this stuff. It's a journey that's there for a reason. People go on it. I went on it. I'm not saying that I did this. I'm not saying don't do this. It's like a part of the journey that I needed to go on to get to the point where I'm sitting here saying this now. So don't invalidate your own experience because somebody else is at a different part of the journey, I guess, is what's really important to note as well. And then we can go a little bit deeper. As the trajectory of my life plummeted and everything went to shit, I was like seeking a lot more support from my people around me, and they weren't able to deliver that because they were basically like a lot of the really cynical, what do you call them? Like, people like my stepdad, who just like have no space in his reality for mental health or any kind of like he's the opposite of the mental health boohoo narrative. He's like, take a couple of teaspoons of concrete, harden the fuck up, I don't want to hear your shit. So like people weren't able to support me with these new problems that I was basically manifesting through focusing on them so much, that I was feeding them so much that they were exacerbated. And then all I could think about was how fucked up my life was and how traumatic my childhood was, and things started to just crumble. And then the next step to that was like starting to look for all of these stupid fucking things to remedy that, like, because I didn't want to go and get addicted to pharmaceutical medications that the psychiatrists were going to push on me. Like, we all know that's like what's going to happen if we go and say, like, I'm feeling depressed and anxious, like, here's this chemical that changes your brain balance. Like, had no interest in that. So I started looking for all of these other alternative remedies to things. Got into psychedelics, which is just like, so I created all of these problems, and then I took a bunch of drugs and got really high and told myself that I was solving all of these problems that I created in my own mind. Like, it was just this big cycle of nonsense, really. And I'm really grateful that I ran into the right people to break that cycle and free me from it, because not everybody does. And there's probably people who would hate this video because they're in that part where they're doing all kinds of weird meditations and guided rituals and magic and psychedelics or what have you, like that whole new age bracket of stuff, like, that is there to remedy all of these issues that have basically been created by a culture that is just, it doesn't make sense to itself. Like, and I don't even want to devalue any particular practice or religion or spirituality or, you know, methods or anything, but I do think that you can sort of short circuit this whole thing just by actually dealing with the problem that's right in front of you. And that's where you can get really black and white. Like, you're not making enough money, like, why? Let's figure it out. Let's like really focus on the actual problems instead of all of this abstraction. All of this stuff that is, you know, you can't really put your finger on it. Like, you're feeling depressed, like, depressed isn't something that you can really work with if it's just a vague sensation, you know, or not that it's vague, it's like hectic, it could be crushing and like so prevalent that it's the only thing that you can really define your life by when you're really deep in it. But, you know, like, it's this vague thing, you can't really do much with it. You're not going to figure out how to, like, the depression is the effect. We need to look at, like, how can we make life better so that we're not creating as much depression and anxiety? Like, how can we develop the skills to deal with life so that we can actually enjoy this experience that we're having? And, you know, I don't plug it all the time, but holographic kinetics is the way to do it so quickly. Like, if you actually want to deal with the cause of what's affecting you, you should be contacting Steve Richards. He's the elder who created holographic kinetics. It acknowledges the traditional law of this country, and it's just the most powerful thing. And it's just sped up the recovery process so much. And that's when I probably came to all of these realizations, like through actually dealing with the real root causes of all of these things that I created. Like, that's when all of this started to make sense to me. I was like, oh, this is what I've done to myself. I've gone along with this like mental health boohoo narrative and created all of these extra problems on top of the trauma that I already had, because I didn't know how to deal with the trauma that I had. And I guess that's like, if you've made it this far and you are triggered and you're still thinking like, oh, I don't know about this, like, that's one thing that I can say. Like, if you don't know how to deal with the trauma that you have, you're going to go on a wild, wacky journey looking for things outside yourself, looking for connection and validation and empathy, looking for crazy new age possibilities and therapies and remedies, and travel to the Amazon jungle to drink poison with a shaman and spew your guts up and shit liquid for 3 days. Like, that's the kinds of things that you do when you're desperate and you don't have answers. But the answers are available. And something deep inside of you knows that it's simple. It doesn't have to be this wild ride that we take ourselves on. There's not a wild goose chase at all. The answers are inside of you, and you know what you need to do. And step one is getting to the realization that a lot of the things that you're pouring your energy into are actually feeding things that you do not want. If you could just contemplate that for a few minutes and realize even one area where you're doing this, one thing that you're feeding that is actually detrimental to your overall life. Like one thing where you have a relationship where every time you catch up with that person, all you do is talk about how hard life is. Like, break that pattern and tell them. Like, don't just be weird and like show up and be like, look, I don't want to hear about all your negative stuff. Like, next time you go over there, set an intention. Today we're going to create something. Today we're going to go on an adventure that we've never been on before. Today we're going to have a discussion about what actually is holding us back in life, and we're going to do something together. Like, be proactive, not reactive. Make small changes and be consistent. Don't just do one dramatic, impulsive, ridiculous thing and hope that that's going to fix your life. It doesn't work like that. It's always going to be the small, consistent things that you choose to implement. That's why I like going away to all these retreats and things. It feels amazing. You come back and you just fight with everybody that you love because they don't get it. But really, the fact of the matter is that you can't possibly integrate the way that a Vipassana monk lives into your daily life after 10 days sitting in a room for 12 hours a day. It just doesn't work like that. If you want to actually build a life that's conducive to you, you need to start where you are and do the things that you want to add to your life while you're also going to work, cooking dinner, looking after the kids, going to your sports team, keeping your hobbies alive, keeping your relationships alive. Fit some meditation into that. Don't go away on a crazy, wacky adventure and then come back and expect it all to work. And I'm the one saying that. Again, like, I'm talking to myself in these journals. They're never intended to be advice or guidance. I'm the one that's gone on more wacky, wild adventures than anybody else trying to figure out my shit. And I've only just actually settled the fuck down to do what I know I need to do. And after a very short period of time, I can say that the results are exponentially better, and I can see the trajectory of my life changing from that. It was plummeting for a few years, and then it sort of, as I started to really grab a hold of the steering wheel again, I was like all over the place a little bit, up and down, and like kind of just getting it back to an even, like not plummeting anymore, but like not going up either, like not getting anywhere that's really worth noting. But now, like, the trajectory has changed in the opposite direction, and I am on my way to the most incredible life I can imagine. And it's like to the point where, like, I'll need to rethink what I want to imagine for myself each month, because the possibility horizon is hurtling towards me so quickly now that there's always something new for me to consider. There's always there's just so much coming at me now. And yeah, hopefully there's something in this journal that like can sort of like give you a little peek into like where I went and like how I got lost and how I found myself again, and that could just like ignite a little bit more acknowledgement and awareness in you about what needs to happen. And if you find anything valuable in these journals, please pass them on to other people who might find some benefit or enjoyment in them. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave your comments down below, and I'll see you again very shortly.